When you think of private railroad startups in the United States, companies like Brightline or perhaps the Texas Central Railroad come to mind. But half a century ago, there was another company that gave it a try. In the 1970s, two very important things happened with regards to passenger rail in the United States. Firstly, in 1971, Amtrak began operation of intercity passenger services across the United States. And secondly, the private railroads that previously operated these passenger services were no longer required to and could focus on freight operations exclusively. It was a bad time to be in the passenger rail business as it was vastly unprofitable. If this was how things were going for passenger rail in the United States at this time, then why would any company start a new, privately funded passenger operation during this time? The Autotrain Corporation was a privately funded attempt at just that, initially operating a service between Lorton, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and Sanford, Florida, just outside of Orlando. This was a unique type of train as it carried passengers but also their personal vehicles on the trip. The service was set up to allow travelers from the Northeast to travel down to Florida overnight and skip the traffic, then being able to avoid having to rent a car upon arrival in Central Florida. This idea was also helped by the newly opened and increasingly popular Disney World being just miles away from the southern terminus in Sanford. The service was due to start sometime in 1971, just as most other railroads were shutting down their unprofitable passenger services as Amtrak took over these services. This service was due to start sometime in 1971, just as most other railroads were shutting down their unprofitable passenger services as Amtrak took over these services. This seemed like a bad time to start off a new passenger service, however there was one advantage of this timing. With railroads shutting down services, the Autotrain Corporation could purchase the most luxurious passenger equipment at bargain deals, since the equipment was of no use to anyone else. The railroad also acquired several dual-level enclosed auto-carrying cars, which would be placed on the end of the train to store the passengers' vehicles. With the equipment situation sorted out and agreements to use trackage along the route in place, service was ready to start. The first trains ran on December 6, 1971, with one train running in each direction each day. The travel times were set up for an early evening departure with an early morning arrival the next day, with the trains running non-stop along the route. This route quickly became recognized as a success, with the Autotrain Corporation looking to expand further across the United States. The next route to be launched was one from Louisville, Kentucky to Sanford, Florida, which was launched sometime in 1976. However, this route would not be as well received as the first. Derailments in 1976 and again in 1978, although they were minor, damaged the train's image to a point from which it would never recover. Also, there wasn't much demand on the second route as there was on the first, and this combined with the derailments meant the beginning of the end for the Autotrain Corporation. The lower than expected revenue from the Louisville expansion resulted in that route being discontinued in 1979, but even with the discontinuation of the route, payments from the aforementioned derailments and increasing crew costs were becoming a burden on the corporation. Eventually, service ended on the Lorton route on April 30th, 1981, with both final trains departing that day and arriving the next. And just like that, the Autotrain Corporation shut down for good, with most of the equipment being scrapped.
There's live entertainment and movies. You'll need reservations, so call now, toll free. The Autotrain to Florida, for your car and you. It's the most gracious train service America has seen since the golden age of railroad travel.
But it wasn't the end. In 1983, the service would be taken over by Amtrak along the original Lorton to Sanford route using Amtrak-owned equipment. This route would quickly become a moneymaker for Amtrak, as it is still one of their most profitable routes to this day. Unlike the private passenger railroads of today that focus on speed and a modern travel experience, the Autotrain Corporation took a rather different approach to draw people to the service. While ultimately it failed partly due to overambitious expansion plans, Amtrak has operated the route for almost 40 years, with the train consistently being one of the railroad's most successful. Be sure to subscribe for more.